From the trails to the road to the track, if it's running, you'll find it right here on Trail Tales ARP. Run wild.
Hey everybody, welcome to Trail Tales ARP, a running podcast. Sean Sobon with you here today, and it's great to have you back, Russell the runner, after your move to British Columbia about a month and a half ago. It's good to have you back on here, man. How have you been?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be back on the podcast, and it's been quite the move out here from Ontario to Prince George, British Columbia. But it's been going well so far, and I feel extremely grateful to be out here. And yeah, everything's been going well so far, work-wise, and meeting lots of people, a lot of amazing people, and it's great to be back on the podcast here from BC.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you back, buddy. We've missed you. And so you had a pretty big run yesterday. You did an ultra yesterday, but it wasn't like a trail ultra. Just give us a brief description of what you did yesterday.
So yesterday was quite a different ultra marathon experience, given how it's -20 here and there's plenty of snow. I decided to do an indoor track ultra marathon. And so at the Northern Sports Center, they have a 280-meter track. It's not even 400 meters. And so they have this unique 600-lap challenge. And so I decided what better way than to, given the weather outside, than to do 3 separate 200-lap ultras of 56 kilometers each through their 600-lap challenge. And so yesterday was quite the adventure.
So was yesterday your first leg of the challenge, I guess?
Yes, so it was part 1 of 3.
Amazing. Good work, Russell. You never cease to amaze with all these running challenges that you do and running challenges that you've come up with. You've done a lot of ultra marathons to raise funds for various charities throughout the world. A lot of times is to help children, which is really great. And I met somebody recently that has a lot of those similarities with you, and running marathons to help people out and using their running to make a positive change in the world. And that's our guest today that we have with us. It's Mr. Jerry Dunn. He's coming to us from Florida. Jerry has been dubbed America's Marathon Man. His running accolades go back to 1981, believe it or not. That's the year I was born. Okay, so that's kind of crazy. Just put things into perspective for you. 1981, Jerry ran the Philadelphia Marathon. It was his first sanctioned marathon. In 1989, he ran a benefit run for Habitat for Humanity. So he was the original Russell the Runner, maybe if we can call him that. And he titled across the state in 28. He ran from Illinois-Indiana state line to the Indiana-Ohio state line, 50 miles per day for 3 days, which is quite amazing. In 1981, another run, or 91 rather, another run for Habitat for Humanity, shore to shore in 104. It consisted of a marathon a day, 6 days a week for 15 weeks. And in that time, he ran a distance from San Francisco to DC in 104 days. And it took a cumulative 50,000 miles of training, competitive miles, for his efforts. And in that year, he met President Jimmy Carter. And most recently, there's a lot here. If we need to see the rest of Mr. Dunn's accolades, you're going to have to read it yourself. 2016, he ran 70 kilometers in honor of his 70th birthday on the day of the Lean Horse Ultra Marathon. And Jerry hasn't stopped yet. And we were going to talk a little bit about what he did last year and what he has plans for in the future. So, Jerry, with that introduction, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here. And the first thing I'd like to say is I can resonate with what Russell did yesterday, because on my 60th birthday, I went to Black Hills State University indoor fieldhouse track, which is an 8-mile track, and ran 480 laps to get 60 miles in for my 60th birthday. So running around a track for 14 hours, or what, it is a challenge to keep it all together. I switched directions every hour, which is one of the things I did. I invited my friends to come and run with me for a few, for an hour or so. But anyway, that's another one of the things that's on that list of crazy things I've done over the last 45 years of running.
Yeah, it's a big long list, and I wish we had time to get through the entire thing. But Jerry, we spoke a few days ago off camera, and we had a pretty great conversation. And so I wanted to kind of just for the listeners, the synopsis I just read really doesn't cover everything for you, but why don't you give us a quick rundown of, let's say you're running in terms of why you started running and where that's kind of led you to today, briefly, if you can. I know it's a long
Okay.
long question.
And I have a habit of, talking a lot, but I'll keep it as concise as I can.
Sure.
When I first moved to Florida, I worked in a restaurant. I was dating a girl that worked there. Her brother was the head lifeguard at Siesta Key Beaches. She and I went to the beach today. He kept telling me, you should be a runner. You look like a runner. You should run with me and the lifeguards. I said, Johnny, I didn't run in school. I hated running in the Army. I don't want to run. And he wouldn't let up. And so one day I ran a half a mile on the beach barefoot with Johnny and the other lifeguards. And that was in 1975. And basically, that's where Marathon Man was born on Siesta Key Beach in 1975, just because I wanted to shut Johnny up. So, but I found out that running barefoot on the beach was a lot different than Fort Knox climbing the hill in full fatigues and backpack and all that stuff. So for the first couple of years, the first 2 years, I ran solely at the beach barefoot, no shoes. I've read in the Sarasota Herald Tribune that they were having their first 10K. So I went out and bought a pair of Nike trainers and ran. It took me like an hour or two, I think, or something ridiculous. But that was my first official event, a 10K here in Sarasota. And then from then on, for quite a few years, I just ran local 10Ks, local 5Ks. Then I decided if I'm going to be a runner, I need to do a marathon. So I got a Runner's World magazine, found a 12-week schedule for your first marathon, did that religiously, and went to Philadelphia and ran a 3:43 in my first marathon. I experienced the wall like most people. I was dying the last 3 miles, but I found out I could do that. So a couple of years later, I did Chicago, knocked 15 minutes off my time, and then just did marathons occasionally. Not like I ended up doing, but my local running store owner introduced me to trails at Eagle Creek Park in Indianapolis, Indiana. And that's when I got hooked on getting off the road. Well, let me back up just a second. I was trying to see if I was any good in the early days. And, I got my best marathon down to a 7:12 pace and knew I wasn't going to get much better. And then I found trail running and kind of I didn't give up on running road races and marathons, but I found a new love running trails. Progressed to finding out that I wasn't fast, but I was durable, and I could seemingly run long distances, not effortlessly, but I could do it. So my buddy, a new friend, was doing things like he'd been to Barkley twice, and so I went with him one time just to see what that was all about. But he'd done a couple of 100 miles, so I decided I wanted to do 100-mile. I found them. I did it smart, like I didn't always do, but I did a 30K, a 50K, a 50-miler. I crewed for somebody on a 50-miler. I did 100K. I crewed for my buddy on a 100-miler and did 50 miles of that with him, the last 50. And then I decided, okay, I'm ready to do 100. So in '89, I went to Vermont and was really, really pleased. I ran 22:41 in my first 100, even though it was back in the day, there were only 12 100-milers. Vermont was the easiest of the 100-milers. Quick side story there. I go into the last aid station. My wife is my crew person. She's inexperienced. Told her I needed batteries in my headlamp. She said, okay, gave them to me. I got 2 miles, 2 miles away from the aid station, 3 miles from the finish line, and my headlamp went out. I'm standing in the woods. For a little while, I was like panicked, what am I going to do? Then I realized I wasn't last. And I said to myself, I'll just stand here and wait for somebody to come by. So 2 guys came by working off of one headlamp. And I said, can I join you? They said, if you want to be third in line off of one light. And we crossed the line 3 miles later in 22:41, all holding hands and going across the finish line together. So that was my first 100 miler. Leadville was my next attempt. 2 years later, I DNF'd, my only DNF at 100 miles. I got all the way back to Mayqueen, but I was 20 minutes behind schedule. So then I had a friend who was very active in Habitat for Humanity, and I decided I wanted to do something, to help raise the awareness and raise some funds for Habitat. So I'd been hearing about these multi-day things. So that's when I decided, let me see if I can do 50 miles a day and run across my home state of Indiana. Got that done. Later that year, I thought to myself, I read that Habitat was having a 15-week fundraising and building campaign. So I decided I've done one state for Habitat. Let me see if I can do them all. So I took 90 to plan that, and 91 is when I set out to cross the United States. Then after that, I read somewhere that the record for the most marathons in 1 year was 89. So I decided, let me do 93 and 93. And I ended up doing 104, but they weren't all official marathons. I got a lot of flack from the purists in the ultra world and a lot of people because, my first one, we had a hangover 10K in Indianapolis. So I went down 3 hours before the 10K started and ran 20 miles on the track, did the 10K, called that a marathon for the day. And so over the course of the year, I created some 26.2 milers that weren't really marathons, but I ended up doing that 104 times in 93. Next on the agenda of those things was when I realized that the Boston Marathon, the 100th, was coming up in 96, and that I could do multi-day marathon distances. I declared that I was going to go run the 100th Boston course 26 days in a row, which I ended up doing. And I always tell people that's the star in my resume, because I had 3.5 minutes of network news time on the morning of the 100th running of the Boston Marathon. This unknown guy from South Dakota, just shows up and runs the course every morning for 26 days. Let's see, that's 96. Then nothing really happened. 98, I went to New York. It was turning 29 years old that year. So I went to Central Park and ran the original New York City Marathon course in Central Park for 28 consecutive mornings, and then ran the New York City Marathon to celebrate the 29th birthday of the New York City Marathon. On my way out of town, Keith Olbermann had me on his sports show, ESPN sports show from back in the day. Said, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, turn of the century is coming pretty soon. I'll have to think of something to do. And that's when I thought, let me see if I can do 200 marathons in 2000, all on certified marathon courses. So my format for that was to go to a city, run the marathon course 16 days in a row. Always one of those 6 days was going to be the event. And out of the 200 days, I ended up doing 186 completed marathons in the year 2000. And then I kind of took a break. First of all, I had the crash that comes after, I took all of 1999 to plan that, 2000 to execute it. And, when things like that are over, I didn't run, probably for 4 or 5 months, got a little depressed, came out of that. In 2002 is when I decided to start I created the first marathon that I created in South Dakota, the Deadwood Mickelson Trail Marathon in 202, 205. I created Lean Horse Ultra, 210. I worked with somebody else. We created Run Crazy Horse Marathon, 2014. I helped some guys create the Black Hills 100. So I switched from being a runner to becoming a race creator and race director. And I sold those all a few years ago. So now I'm just enjoying going out and running wherever I want to, whenever I want to, as far as I want to, at whatever speed I want to. So, and I've got one more project in the works that's going to happen next year. So that's a long answer to the question, but it was kind of a speed dial of what I've been doing for the last 47 years.
Yeah, to put 47 years worth of running and living and experience into one answer, it's kind of hard to do, but I think you did a really good job there.
Thank you.
I do want to comment though. I think, you know, you were running ultras and into that scene long before it became popular. I think, you know,
Yeah.
within the ultra running community, I think that sport has just exploded in recent
And I've watched
years.
that happen. Yeah. Quick story there. When I created Lean Horse Ultra, I became the 13th 100-miler in the United States. And I don't know how many 100-milers there are for sure today, but I believe they're over between 250 and 300, maybe, or at least 200. So yeah, it was a whole nother era back then, you know, before Dean came along and popularized and commercialized ultra running, which that's a whole nother story. But, you know, there were a lot of us that when he first came on the scene, it was like, don't do this, man. We've got this nice thing that's low key and, you know, it's ultra running and we just go do what we do. But now I believe that what he has done for ultra running has been a good thing, because it has gotten a lot more people, you know, out there finding what it's like and what you learn about yourself and all the stuff that goes along with doing ultra distances. And so, but you're right. It was last century was different than this century.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Jerry, remind us of your motto that you kind of live by here. You had mentioned to me off air, but I want you to have the opportunity to share it with us.
I walked in the local running store in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the Nike salesman was in there talking to the owner, my friend that introduced me to trail running. And I heard the words come out of his mouth, "Don't limit your challenges, challenge your limits." And I didn't pick that up as my tagline for a while, but shortly after that, you know, maybe a year or so later, that became my motto for myself and the signature on my emails and my challenge to other people to, you know, don't limit yourself by thinking you can't do something, you know, challenge that limit and see what happens. And for me, a lot of great stuff has happened. And, you know, I talk to other people that are of like mind that, you know, let me see if I can do that kind of thing. And, you know, it's really good for the mind, the soul, and the body to do that. Here's another quick little side. I got a call from a lady in Australia one day, and she said, I read your quote, "Don't limit your challenges, challenge your limits." And I'm writing a book about what I did, which I'm the first and only female to have kayaked the entire Nile River. And she said, I would like to use your quote as a chapter heading. And can I do that? And I said, sure. Anyway, that just surprised me. I mean, I didn't know people were actually reading it and thinking, you know, that it was it is what it is. But that has what you were referencing is don't limit your challenges, challenge your limits, and, you know, see what the human potential is for you.
Yeah, it's two things there. It's one is you never know who's listening or who needs to hear what you have to say. So it's always good to carry forward that positive attitude. And, you know, I'm sure all of us have either been in that position where we've helped somebody or somebody has helped us, even unknowingly, right? And I think that's one of the beautiful things about being alive, I think, in general. But I think also, based on that motto, I think, and Russell, I'll have you chime in here too. I think regardless of the distance that somebody's running, whether it's somebody's couch to 5K or somebody's first 50, 80, 100 miler, it's challenging our limits, right? Wherever we're at, everybody has a different starting point. And you know, just that spirit of wanting to see what you can do, and you want to push yourself and get out of that comfort zone. I think that's one of the beautiful things about running. I think a lot of people are attracted to it in that regard, because you know, if you ask somebody who doesn't run, they think, oh, it sounds like suffering. Why would I want to do that? But then there are people that do it because, you know, it is suffering, but I enjoy it and I want to see how much I can handle or take, right? So, Russell, where would you chime in on that? Because you've done lots of big runs as well, right?
Absolutely. I want to begin by saying, Jerry, your life journey is beyond phenomenal. And anyone who comes across the remarkable life journey that you've been on should be endlessly inspired, as I am endlessly inspired by you and your incredible journey through your life.
Thank you.
To chime in on those specific thoughts, it's incredibly powerful to have a notion impact others in a deeply meaningful way. And so your quote of don't limit your challenges, and to find those limits that you want to set for yourself, that's incredibly powerful, and it's far reaching. So with regards to different sports, clearly it impacted that woman who wants to go kayaking, and it can apply to all sorts of different sports, not just running or marathoning or ultra marathoning.
Right.
So that's incredibly powerful.
And it doesn't even have to
far
be
reaching.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be sports. I mean, that can be applied to almost anything.
Absolutely.
You know,
any goal that you set
Yeah.
for yourself in your life, it's applicable to that.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Well said, Russell.
I'd like to hear some of the things that you've done.
Well, so I started running just over 4 years ago, and thank you for asking, given you're our amazing guest today, Jerry. I started with a 5K, not much different than what you started off with. And my first 10K was not pretty either, just like your first 10K was a bit of a struggle.
Right.
But I found a love for the sport of running, and I tried a half marathon, and it somehow went fairly well, and I kept growing from there. And once I finished 30K, I said, well, the next goal should probably be a marathon. But I kept thinking to myself, and this was in 2018, that marathons are for athletes, and I didn't consider myself to be an athlete.
I never did either.
So I'm glad that we share that in common.
Yeah.
But so I just decided I've been enjoying running, and I'm going to go out and try it. And it was on March 25, 2019 that I believe that I truly became a runner. That day I set out to run a marathon, and I ran my first ultra marathon. I ran 50 kilometers that day, and
All right.
was life-changing, and it's brought me on a journey that has been incredibly special since then. And my most special spiritual journey is 105 miles or 169 kilometers this past June. And I'm ever grateful for that journey and how it changed me as a human being, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So
yeah, that's what, I long for everybody to experience that, but you can only experience what you're talking about to the depth that you're talking about if you put yourself through, what you need to put yourself through to do a super long distance. I mean, you can't find out any of those things as clearly and as powerfully at the marathon distance. I mean, it takes
absolutely,
it takes you getting to that point that we've all heard about from other runners, but you have to decide how bad you want it. You have to decide that how much it means to you. You have to decide that you're going to continue to hurt until you get to the finish line, and all that is a lesson that can't be learned anywhere else. And that I think that's what makes truly ultra distance runners have this bond that, they've been in that spot and they've learned those things about themselves, and nobody else can, like I already said, you have to be there and do it before you can have the experience. And it's powerful.
Absolutely. I know that during my 105-mile spiritual journey, everything was pointing to quitting at about 72 miles. And I reflected on my life and everything that happens in your personal life. And for me, I found strength through all of the hardships I've had to face in my life. And that is what got me through those final 33 miles or 55 some kilometers.
Yeah. And the other thing that happens,
it's not just running.
Yeah. The other thing that happens is, and I tell people this all the time, which you've heard before, I'm sure, but you've got that in your trick bag, so to speak, for the rest of your life. And you're not going to face much else that's that difficult, physically and mentally. And you can always say, when you face those new difficult situations, I did 109 miles. It kicked my ass and I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, but I did. So I can probably handle this too, whatever this is.
Absolutely. Those transferable life lessons from
Yeah.
those difficult ultramarathon life experiences are absolutely applicable and have full parallels to them between the sport, this beautiful sport that we get to experience in ultramarathon and life.
Yeah.
And applying those hard lessons from those ultramarathons to getting through anything in life couldn't be more powerful.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, so Jerry, so your first 100-miler, Vermont 100, tell us all about your preparation for that event, and tell us about your mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional experience at the Vermont 100. I know that you obviously mentioned the final few miles there, and that must have been incredibly difficult.
Well, a few other tales from that. I mean, I was, as I mentioned earlier, I trained progressively at longer distances. I mean, there were times later in my life when I was in such a shape that I could pretty much go run any distance anytime, but this was my first one, and I knew that I needed to incrementally increase my distances. So I went into it, feeling pretty confident that I knew it was going to hurt, but I was pretty sure that I would get it done. It became a family vacation. I was married at the time, and my wife and 2 kids, we went up to Acadia National Park in Maine, hung out for a few days in the rain in our tent. We weren't campers, so that whole thing was I'm waiting to do my first 100-miler, and I'm getting soaked and wet in this tent. But we get to the starting area, and things are going pretty well throughout the first 30 or 40 miles. Quick little side story: when I got married, I became a stepfather. I had 2 sons that I was helping raise. One of them, because of me, became a high school cross country runner. He's in his junior year. He's been running cross country for 2 years. When I first took him out, before he even went to the cross country team, I was faster than him for about 3 days. And then anyway, he said he wanted to run 10 miles with me. I said, okay, you let me know when you want to run with me. So he had picked 60 to 70. I stopped at 60 and took about a 15-minute nap. And then Dan and I went out, and we're in some moderately serious climbing there. And I kind of just wore his butt out. I'm doing my 60 to 70 miles, and he's just doing 10. Anyway, but that helped me, that gave me some motivation to keep on going. I never got to the point where it was like, I can't finish this. It was a struggle, but I was set up to believe that I was going to be able to do it. And I've come to a point in my life where I've realized that I think the universe has been taking pretty good care of me all, and introducing me to people and places and things that, need to happen in my life. And you know, that those two guys in the woods in the dark of night kind of affirmed for me that, you know, just keep on track, keep focused, and you'll get through this kind of thing. I don't know if that's enough of an answer for what your question was. It was a little too detailed maybe, but that was it. It ended up being a good experience. Okay, so but on Monday morning, I could not walk down steps. You know, I went through all that pain and suffering that goes along with the days afterwards is also kind of a lesson in that, you know, there is a price for all this, and it will too go away, but you have to endure all that comes with having completed the 100-miler.
Very well said. I appreciate the details in your answer for sure. And you know, I have my biggest run has been 50K, but I've had those experiences too where you feel like you just want to stop and quit and give up. And I remember my very first marathon, there was no training involved. I said, I'm just going to go out and run the distance, right? It was a March day. It was kind of pleasant outside, and you know, I live in a really hilly region of Ontario, so I picked this backside road, and I figured I'm just going to go start running, and set off at a good pace, got to the halfway point, and turned around, and that's when things started to fall apart on me. Like the weather had changed first. I was not prepared because it started raining and sleet and snow, and when I left, it was like 8 Celsius, so you know, and sunny. So the weather got miserable. I was really cold, started having a lot of hip pain and stuff, and I'm just thinking this is going to take forever now. And all of a sudden in the distance, I see my family, my wife and my 2 kids. They come up in the car and just to check on me. And you know, I was offered a ride to get into the car, and it was pretty tempting, just quit, but I couldn't do it. I said, you know what, you guys just go ahead. They stuck with me and encouraged me for a little while, and then the kids got cranky and decided they had to leave. So I said, I'll meet you at home, and I did, because I remember, you know, my running started turning into like run walk, and then I started walking more, and to the point where like even walking was difficult because it hurt so much, and all because, you know, I didn't train. I just thought I'm just going to go out and
Right.
do this, and you know, I did it, and paid the price, but that emotional and mental journey that was there, that you had to kind of go through. I can relate to it, what you're saying with everything that you've had to go through as well. Um, so I want to kind of change gears here a little bit, Jerry. So we're gonna talk about 2022 and your Dakota Slam
Okay.
a little bit. So you're 76 years old this year,
Right.
and you know you've this is quite remarkable. So through the year, starting on May 30th, you ran every event you've ever had a hand in the state of South Dakota, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna put this in our show notes so everybody can see it. There's some great pictures and descriptions here. But first thing, I want to just ask you a little bit about the tuxedo and the finish line.
um, well, I believe it or not, I'm kind of a showboat, and I have been most of my life. And from the inception of the Deadwood Mickelson Trail Marathon in 2002, I had the idea that I wanted to be at the finish line in my tuxedo, congratulating everybody and celebrating with them on their victory for the day. But for the first few years, I was the show. I mean, I was the race director, and had to attend to every detail. You know how directing a race is. It's all consuming on race day. But then I hired somebody to become my assistant race director, and she was incredible. The year after I hired her, she became the full-time race director. The next year, I sold her my business, but not the next year, a few years later. Anyway, she gave me the freedom to finally suit up at the finish line and just give everybody high fives and scream great job. And I also had personalized bibs. I always thought that was important because, you know, when you're in a race, whatever you're wearing on your shirt is what they yell at you. And so I was able to greet everybody by name when they came across the finish line and celebrate with them. And it just became kind of a tradition. And quick story there, my only DNF in ultra running is Leadville. So I think 4 years ago, I called up the race directors who I know and said, look, I have this thing that I do at my race of wearing a tuxedo at the finish line, and the runners seem to like it. And I need to do a makeup event of your event, and I'm not going to be able to run your race. Can I come in my tuxedo and, you know, be crazy at your finish line? And it turned out to be a good thing. So I invited myself to a couple other races, and it's just, you know, part of it is me showing off, but the deeper part of it is, I don't know if you looked at the YouTube video, but the closing piece on that is that it says I still get a chill every time I see somebody cross the finish line. And, you know, I know what it's like to finish your first or your 50th marathon. And I just want to be there and be part of the celebration. And that's the primary reason, but it's become kind of a shtick, and it's fun.
It looks like a lot of fun. What year was that in Leadville that you were at the finish line for them?
Oh, that's the
Trick question.
I looked
Pop
up the pictures the other night, but I think it was 15 or 16.
Okay.
It's the year Lance Armstrong was there as a runner, I think, and not doing it because he was trying to get the what's the iron, if you do the bike race and the 100-mile foot race and another event, and I think he was participating anyway. Whatever year that was is year I was there. So back to the Dunn's Dakota Slam. I'll give you a little setup on that. 2 years before, well, we'll get into that story later. But okay, I'll give it back to you now. Yeah, no, you want me to rattle off what I did, or?
That's fair. Actually, I wanted to take a pause here at the Dakota Slam here at this one event here, in Ragnar, Colorado.
Oh yeah,
the Ragnar, Colorado, Snowmass, Colorado, June 11th, 12th.
Yeah.
So this was a relay race, it sounds like, and you were part of a team, Team Runners High.
Right.
Which is a great name. We've all kind of, I think, if we've run for any length of time, at one point or another, have been fortunate enough to experience the quote unquote Runners High. But that kind of has a double meaning for you, Jerry. And I wanted to kind of segue into that topic, if you're ready to kind of broach that one now with us, and talk about your advocacy for cannabis.
Okay.
And kind of the experiences you've had with that, because we discussed that a little bit off air a few days ago, and I found the topic quite interesting.
Okay. Let me see where to start that one. Initially, I was going to go out as an activist for legalization of medicinal marijuana, to get it into VA facilities, because it has been proven that medicinal marijuana prescribed by a doctor is a very effective treatment plan for vets with PTSD. We as vets cannot get prescribed cannabis because it's still illegal.
Is that in every state right now?
It's not in every state right now, no.
Okay.
But so I was telling my story, and I wanted to go out and make that my business, selling merchandise. Just say yes for the legalization of marijuana. I needed somebody to help me with that business. I hired 2 people that I didn't know very well. They were heavy into the cannabis industry, the booming cannabis industry. And they said, you don't want to do that. What you want to do is take your story and sell CBD, Marathon Man CBD. So we set about creating that business, newspaper articles and magazine articles. And Josiah Hesse was writing a book about, endurance runners and cannabis. They introduced me to him. He did a couple of interviews with me. We went out for a couple of runs. We did some gummies when we were out on the runs. And then fast forward to Ragnar Relay, I saw online that he was going to be a member of the Runners High team in Ragnar. And I said, hey, I've always wanted to do one of those. Can I be on your team? So I ended up being on Runners High team with the author of the book, and everybody on our team, uses cannabis. I have to back up a little bit. The connection to Ragnar also is I used to be very hesitant to talk about my use of cannabis in public settings. And I was at the American Trail Runners Association Race Directors Conference in St. Louis Obispo, Utah, having lunch. And one of the speakers was a man who was on the staff of Ragnar Relays, and we were sitting around talking. And the topic of endurance runners using cannabis for training and came up. And so that's when I first got the freedom to say, he said, you would be totally surprised at how many ultra runners and other athletes are using cannabis. So that business failed. It took me down mentally because I spent all the money I had trying to get this business up and running. We're going to get to what's going on here. I went through some serious mental issues, got through that, and was prescribed the narcotic drugs, antidepressant, all that stuff. And I decided that I was not going to go that route, that I was going to self-medicate with cannabis, which I'd been using for many, 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 many years. Coming through that process of, I had suicidal ideation, and that's why I committed myself to the hospital. But we're going to tie my recovery to cannabis and to running. And during the initial months after my incident, I used running and cannabis to keep, to get myself back on the road. So when in June of 2020, when I ran solo Deadwood Mickelson Trail Marathon, that was my statement to myself that running has saved my life. I'm back on track. And then after that, I thought, look, I've always wanted to do all of my events. So for the next year, I decided that, that was what I was going to do. So that's how Ragnar Relay and Runner's High and my use of cannabis kind of all, and the current topic of professional athletes being under so much stress that they have to, not perform, cancel out of events, deal with all the stress. And a lot of them seem to be, using cannabis as a way to get through and recover with that. But I think where you wanted me to go was to the cannabinoid system of the runner's high is something that occurs naturally in our bodies because of the cannabinoid system that we have in our body. THC and marijuana is a cannabinoid. And when you ingest a little bit of that, it just accelerates that runner's natural high. So I've gotten to the point where I can kind of like turn on that high by doing a few 4 milligrams of a gummy before I go out for a long training run or before I participate in an event. And it's not uncommon for other athletes to be doing that. It's much more common than I thought. So that's the tie-in, I think, after all that I've said, got us from your offering of a segue into Ragnar and Runner's High.
Yeah. First off, Jerry, I want to thank you very much for being so open and honest with your past struggles and everything that you've gone through. And I said recently to somebody, we were talking about it, if you're alive, you have some sort of mental health issue. I think you don't get through this life unscathed, and it comes in varying degrees, whether it's something quite serious as having suicidal ideations. And I've had friends and family who have completed suicide. And so it's a topic that hits close to home. And we had discussed, I'm not in the Army or anything like that, but I do work as a paramedic. I have 20 years on, so I've seen a lot of friends and colleagues struggle with mental health. I've had my own issues as well over time. So it's a topic that we discuss on the show from time to time. But so I want to thank you for that and congratulate you on finding a way out of that, because it's not something that people can do all the time. So
no, and it just blew me away, because one thing, I have a master's degree in psychotherapy, and I've always thought I can handle anything. I can think through this. But it was a combination. I mean, why I went down, I was you know, I'd spent all my money trying to start this business. I was also declaring that America's Marathon Man is returning, and I'm going to come out and be a superstar again. But I'm also going to sell you, some CBD, or I saw myself as giving up myself to be using my personality and my history to become, a snake oil salesman, and that's not who I am. I want to sell. Don't limit your challenges, challenge your limits. I want to sell what you can learn through, being conscious about life and being thoughtful and being mindful. And if I'm trying to sell you some CBD, I'm distracting from what my real mission is. And I just couldn't face the debt and the prospect of me going out there and doing that again. And I just, basically lost it and figured, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I'm out of here, But fortunately, that's not the way it turned out.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and we're very fortunate for that. And you had mentioned the cannabinoid system, and it was funny when you had mentioned that, because I had learned, a few years ago that, our body is full of different receptors for cellular processes and things like that. But the most abundant receptor we have in our body is the cannabinoid receptor, and it resides in our brain. We have them throughout our body, but the majority of them are in our brain tissue, and it really makes me wonder as to why that is. Why is that the most abundant receptor we have in our body, right? And I guess physiologically, like, we can activate those receptors, like you had mentioned, when you're running and you get that runner's high. That's the activation of those receptors. But there's also, that the hemp plant that people will use to consume this product and get THC and activate those receptors as well. And you had mentioned that, taking gummies. Now, I'm not well versed with dosing and things like that. Like, I've used marijuana in the past and things like that, but I'm not a regular consumer. It's been many, many years, probably since my 20s, since I've used it. But I wanted to ask, like, 4 milligrams for somebody like me who hasn't used it in over 20 years, what would 4 milligrams do to me? Would I be like stoned out of my mind and not be able to run? Like, where's the kind of, therapeutic dose that you're talking about here in terms of having a benefit for running?
Josiah mentions that in his book,
I'll have to read that for sure. I haven't had time yet.
To answer your question, probably, given how long it's been since you consumed any cannabis, 4 milligrams might give you more of a runner's high than you're interested in having. But for me, what it does is it puts me in that space where, it's almost like the runner's high, where things become, well, I was thinking about this last night. I think the reason our personal cannabinoid system kicks in is because it oftentimes it's when we've been running for a while and the lactic acid is starting to build up and we're starting to think this run is long, and our brain just says, here, let me help you. Let me give you some relaxation and some mental relaxation by, shooting some cannabinoids through your system. So it's kind of set up to put you in a space where things are not as painful, they're more pleasant. And I compare it to kind of like the tail end of a smoking high. You get an immediate rush when you use smoked flower, and that goes away pretty quickly. But the edibles comes on slowly. You never get to that really stoned place. You just get to a point where the flowers become more attractive. Your mind is more free to just settle in on what you're doing. Some of the discomfort in your muscle culture goes away, or doesn't go away, but you don't notice it as much as you were before you got the runner's high. So there's and I experimented with it myself. I do 5 milligrams now before pretty much. Well, actually, I've gotten to the point where I'm training fairly hard for this new thing that I'm going to do. And so, I'll usually get up, have breakfast, do 5 milligrams, get on my bike, and start my 20-mile bike ride. And, within 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of the ride, I'm starting to just be mellow, I guess, is, it's an overused word, but it's just like, this is fun. Everything's cool.
I know
Amazing.
of this. It,
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean. I know of this incredible ultra runner, and his name is Michael Versteeg, and he's advocated for a similar type of drug. He's used psilocybin mushrooms,
Yeah.
and he took them at the start of the Cocodona 250, which
Okay.
is over 400 kilometers.
Let me just throw something quickly in. The director of the Cocodona is the person that I had lunch with that used to work for Ragnar, where this whole drug discussion among endurance runners started up for me. So anyway, go ahead. But
No
that's
kidding.
yeah,
It's amazing the different connections
yeah.
that
I'm
occur
sorry, go
for
ahead with the story though.
ultra running. And so he's advocated for psilocybin mushrooms specifically, just as you're advocating for cannabis, Jerry. And I've never taken any of these substances personally, but I can see why you and him are advocating for these different types of substances, because he actually went on to win the Cocodona 250 in 72 hours, and he was quite high throughout the 3-day event. And he just talked about how he would bond with nature and bond with the various landscapes he was traversing through over a 3-day
Yeah,
span.
psilocybin's a little trippier than cannabis, but I mean,
It is?
yeah.
Okay. So cannabis would be more of an intermediate level, whereas psilocybin mushrooms would be
Yeah,
a bit more
I wouldn't start
hardcore.
with those for sure. I would that wouldn't be my first experiment if I were you with some kind of hallucinogenic mind altering substance to help you run, because you would probably get lost in the woods and be running into trees, and or you stop and just look at a flower and spend a half an hour there looking at the beauty of it and the aroma and everything. If you the mushrooms would that's the kind of place that I would find myself if I were doing mushrooms. But I'm glad you told that story, because it just adds affirmation and confirmation to the fact that psychotropic drugs and plants can be beneficial and not, one of the articles in High Times magazine, it says Jerry Dunn dispels the myth, and the myth is that stoners never get anything done. I said earlier, I've been smoking pot for 45 years, 47 years, and I've started using edibles in the last 2 or 3 years. And I've accomplished quite a bit, not only in the running arena, but also, I've started a number of successful businesses, yada, yada, yada. And, that whole thing when back in my day, in the hippie era, and the reason for the Just Say Yes program that I was going to start is because I wanted to, Nancy and Ronnie just say no, and the war on drugs and all the evils of what we're talking about were bullshit. I mean, obviously it has harmed some people, but it's we're slowly but surely, people of my generation particularly are coming to understand that that was all, a lot of that stuff was lies, just so that was the way to control the here's where it boils down to. I mean, people that regularly use cannabis and psilocybin mushrooms usually end up being thoughtful people and questioning everything. And if you get too many of those kind of people in your controlled society, you have problems. And so, back in the 70s, we need to stop these people from free thinking. And so we need to take their marijuana away from them. And, that's, in my opinion, the genesis of that whole thing, that now we're having to everybody relearn that it's really just a plant that grows. It has some tremendous potential for healing. Another quick side, the University of Colorado, shortly after Colorado became legal, started a study. And one of the things they studied was what's the biggest percentage of new users? And it was my generation, the boomers, because we we finally believe that it does, if you're somebody who's ill and is not hungry, smoke some pot or eat an edible, you're going to get the munchies you need to eat. My arthritis is killing me. Do an edible, do a dose of, some amount of THC, you'll feel better. I mean, so all that stuff that was bullshit before is now, we're relearning. And I'm like your friend who did the 250 miler, he's professing that, this is not as bad as you all think it is. And I'm doing the same thing. And, we're going to, hopefully in my lifetime, there'll be a place where it's legal everywhere and people will understand that it's a medicinal plant that can be used to our benefit that's been provided to us by Mother Nature. And it's been being used for hundreds of years, always to enhance your spiritual enlightenment or to, get you more connected with nature, all those things that happen when you're tripping, So anyway, I interrupted and took off on another tirade, but that's how I am.
No worries there, Jerry, at all. I think it's this topic it's a little bit nuanced, and I think that, like anything, any substance can be helpful or harmful. It all depends on how you use it and the dose that you're using it, right? Like,
Right.
there are people that smoke marijuana on a daily basis and they sit on the couch and play video games all day and they're not productive. But
Right.
I would classify those users as the ones that are overusing it or abusing it, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
there are people like yourself that are using it wisely, therapeutically, and with purpose, with intent.
Yes.
So I think there is definitely some benefit there, just like anything, like alcohol. I've seen more destruction done by alcohol than I have by cannabis in my career as a paramedic.
Yeah.
And in Canada now, it's been legal here for a few years, and I live in a small town. There's like 14,000 people here. We've got two stores that sell alcohol, and I think there are 5 now that opened up. We call them dispensaries that sell
Really?
sell,
That's
sell legal
great.
marijuana now. Yeah.
In
So
my opinion,
they're
that's
popping
great.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I one of the articles I have in my voluminous files of articles yet to write and publish is weed versus whiskey. And because I'd spent 27 years drinking also.
Well, there you go.
And
You know.
2 divorces, couple of car wrecks. I was not an angry, mean drunk, but I mean, alcohol was screwing up my life severely. And none of those things happened to me, under the influence of cannabis. So, I think alcohol is the evilest drug we've got out there. I mean, I've watched it destroy families and, just like you're saying, but it's what we've been doing forever, and it's legal, and it's, the whole social, everything that goes around with it, it's acceptable. And we just overlook the fact that it's, ruining lives.
Yeah, I think, again, I think it just boils down to how it's being used, right?
Right.
Like, I don't mind having a glass of wine or
Right.
beer occasionally just to kind of relax, but
That doesn't make you an alcoholic. That's
no, but
about.
if you overdo it, and then you get that mental dependence and you get that physical dependence, the next thing you know, you're addicted, and you no longer have control. It controls you, right? So it's a whole nother topic. But I think that you've demonstrated that there is a definitely safe and therapeutic way to use THC products, and you're the first person who's brought it to light that there are endurance athletes out there that are doing this. And it's quite remarkable to see that. You would think off the top of your head, okay, I'm just going to be lying down and taking a nap in the thistles in the woods, right?
But no, you're running 250 miles,
Yeah, that's it. It's pretty remarkable. So
I want to meet that guy.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to get him on the show one day, Russell. You have to reach out and find him.
Michael Versteeg, he's a tremendous ultra runner. So I mean, what's interesting is the Cocodona 250 he viewed it as the last stretch he did the 800-mile Arizona trail. So
wow.
He's a beyond gifted and phenomenal ultra runner.
No kidding. No kidding. So I want to move down here a little bit, Jerry. We're getting close to the end of our time here, but carrying on with the Dakota Slam here, there were some events that you saddled up and did some riding on a bicycle as well. So how have you incorporated that into your running? Is that Is that because, you know, the longer runs are a little bit harder to do at 76 and cycling's easier? Or is it just a new endurance sport or something? Or have you always
Well,
cycled? I'm not
all
really.
of that is true. It is easier to cycle 26 than it is to run 26. And if you back to the Dakota Slam, if you apparently you've read it all. I mean, that I didn't do the longest distance in each of the events I created. I just participated, and I planned that. You know, I only did the 30K in the Lean Horse Ultra, and anyway, but I challenging my limits. I said I'm going to do the full marathon as in my last event at Run Crazy Horse, and it kicked my ass. But I went back to all those times when I had done things that kicked my ass, and as bad as I felt, I needed to get it done as part of my recovery, and I needed to get it done, you know, so I wasn't I just needed I had to get it done, but I had to draw on that past years of experience, knowing that, you know, yes, you can still get there even though every part of your body is you know, not feeling so well. But cycling, about 3 years ago, I decided to just hop on my bike again, and I really liked it. And I bought a new bike instead of the old 35-year-old Fuji that I was riding, and I'm really getting into it. And that's the perfect segue into what I'm planning to do as maybe my swan song, and that is cycle and run the Great American Rail Trail, which goes from Seattle to Washington, D.C. And my plan is to cycle 50K and run 10K every day for 100 days. And if I can accomplish that, I may hang it up. You know, I'll never stop doing this stuff, but anyway, the cycling has been, it's fun. I love it. It's all road biking. I haven't had any real strong desire to get off roads, but you know, it's become, at my age and all the wear and tear of all those miles. I mean, it's nice to be able to coast once in a while, although I don't do much of that. But I'm loving riding my bike, and I'll never stop running. But the combination is really sweet.
Yeah, you'll have to keep us posted on the Great American Rail Trail endeavor. That sounds quite interesting.
I plan to start on 420, if you know the significance of 420.
I do. I may have heard that date a few times.
Next year, and be done in the middle of July sometime. Amazing. So yeah, I've been thinking about it for a long time. I've started to actually work on it and pulling the pieces together. I found somebody that I'm working with, and you know, I'm going to make an announcement that I'm going to do this pretty soon, and I'll make sure I keep you on the list of postees.
Amazing.
That project couldn't be more exciting, Jerry. And 50K biking and 10K of running every day for, what's the total mileage?
It's 3,700 mile trail.
Okay, so that is 37 miles per day.
Yeah.
So that makes perfect sense. So 100 days.
Yeah. And I know I may not be able to do it in 100, but I'm shooting for actually 104, because 104 has some significance, because in 93, I ended up running 104 marathons. And in 91, it took me 104 days to do the Habitat for Humanity thing. So 104 is my real, you know, drop dead goal, but I'm going to try to do it without any rest days. But, you know, I mean, if you think about it, I'm only cruising at 15 miles an hour. But once I get out of the mountains, to ride 31 miles, you know, is less than 2 hours. You know, I can have another breakfast, take a nap, and go out and run 10K and be done by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And
lots of time to recover.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But it's another challenge.
Oh, well, Jerry, that sounds pretty exciting. You're a man that's lived a life of challenges, and it's so great to have you on the show. And I'm so glad that we connected, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and you know, on your future endeavors and everything. For people who are listening, if anybody wants to reach out to you and have a conversation or anything, how could they do that?
Best is by email. I mean, I have a website. I think you went there, and it's kind of halfway developed, but there is if anybody would like to contact me, they can either email jerrydunsd@gmail.com or www.americasmarathonman.com will get you to my website. And actually, if people start going to my website wanting to connect with me, that's going to force me to get in there and start writing some blogs and, and clean it up a little bit. So it's actually, anyway, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I've dragged my ass on having a website, and it's time, it's the 21st century. It's not 19 anything anymore. I need to catch up with the times. So
that's it. You hear that, Trail Tailors? We got to give Jerry a little kick in the ass here to get him going with his website. So start emailing him, let him know that you're interested in what he has to say and his past experiences. I'd love to see content from you and a great presence from you online. We'll put all those contact things in our show notes for everybody. And if you want to actually watch this podcast, you can do so now on our YouTube channel at Trail Tales ARP. We're on YouTube now. We've been there for a while, but we're starting to put up new content, and you can go there now and check out some recent shoe reviews that Russell and I have done. And we're going to be putting up more content on there as well. So you can kind of see our
so we've come together, thanks to the universe, to help each other, which is what I think life's all about anyway. And if we just, one of the things I learned in my recovery is to stop trying to push hard and make things happen. You have to participate, but you don't have to be in charge and do it your way. If you just kind of ease back a little bit and let things come your way, and like we have come together. I don't know why I cold called you and said, "Can I be on your podcast?" But I did, and now we're both going to help each other, do a little more podcasting and writing and helping people find their challenge and help them. We didn't even get into COPE. I'll just quickly COPE. COP.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you about that, but yeah, we have to talk about that. It's important.
Because when I stopped one day to figure out how have I accomplished all the stuff that I've accomplished, I realized that I had an idea. COPE is conceptualize, then organize. You've got an idea, then you start organizing around that idea, then you personalize it. You make sure that it's going to work for you in the way that you hope that it'll work, and then you go out and exercise the plan. So that's how I have done a lot of things, and that's what I would like for people to come to me about. I mean, I love to tell stories, but I would also, I did mention that I have this degree, master's degree in psychotherapy, and I egotistically threw out there at one point, I can help you cope with any problem you have in life. Just get in touch with me. But I mean, I really would like to have the opportunity to help people work through that process of coping with whatever it is. And I think I can help some people in that way.
You most definitely are able to do that, Jerry, and through your remarkable life journey and your endless resilience.
Thank you.
You can help people cope with anything.
100%.
Yeah. And the trick that I learned in my psychotherapy training was that the answer, the art of psychotherapy is helping the client understand and believe that they have the answer, and the art of therapy is to get them to see that they have the answer and to get them to act on that. And that's what I love to do, is try to help people understand that that you've got the answer in there. You may not know it right now, but let's see if we can find it. And that's where the powerfulness comes in, is because once they find it through somebody's assistance, then it's their idea and it's their belief that they can do this. I mean, yes, I helped them maybe, but my help was to let them understand that you can handle this, whatever it is. And that's the fact of our running. That's why those lessons that we learn when we're hurting and crying and wanting to stop, are useful throughout life, because we can do this, and we proved it, and da 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 da.
No, very well said. Da 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 da. I like it. But yeah, you go through those experiences, and what good are they if you can't share them with others too,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
I think that's the heart of your kind of sentiment there, and I really do appreciate that. So Jerry, with that, I guess we'll close things off here, and we'll leave you with our catchphrase here at Trail Tales ARP, and that is to run wild, my friend. You run wild.
Run wild.
Thank you for the invitation. I'll keep on doing it, because I think I know the routine, so I'll just keep on keeping on.
You've been doing it longer than I've been alive, so. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of Trail Tales ARP. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. I'm Sean Soban.
And I'm Russell the Runner.
If you'd like to support the show, we'd greatly appreciate it if you leave us a review on Apple, Google, or Spotify, or wherever you get the podcast from. And we really do appreciate the time and commitment you take to join us on every episode. You can also email us at trailtalesarp@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at trail_tales_ARP. We will see you next week.
See you next time. Run wild.